Coming up on Over a Barrel.
We are starting to see the seasonal kickoff and people kind of screaming at the pump. And most unfortunately, some of those sub $3 prices are starting to disappear.
Over a Barrel starts right now. And welcome to the show. I'm Matt McClain alongside Patrick DeHaan here on Over a Barrel. And here in February, Patrick, how are things going?
Well, I feel like we're over a barrel, Matt. We are starting to see the seasonal kickoff and people kind of screaming at the pump. And most unfortunately, some of those sub $3 prices are starting to disappear.
Yeah, I even saw some prices because I told you the last time we had done a podcast, I was paying like $2.57, $2.59 a gallon. I'm now paying $2.89 a gallon currently, and I did see some stations yesterday or Sunday actually at $3.09 a gallon. So I'm I'm singing the blues. It's the blues over here, Patrick. I'm just it
really is
feeling kind of down. I'm not gonna lie. So what's going on?
I mean, it's the middle of winter too. So I mean, the feeling down only if gas prices were feeling down. What's cooking here? Worth mentioning at the top of the program here is we had a fairly substantial news. The BP refinery in Northwest Indiana, which is servicing much of the Great Lakes, has been down now for the better part of the last 2 weeks. And so that refinery is massive, Matt. It's one of the largest in the country. It's the largest in the Midwest, 440,000 barrels a day. A lot of folks here, by the way, let's put it into context, that 440,000 barrels a day, they can churn out 10 million gallons of gasoline every day at that one refinery, 4 million gallons of diesel, and 2 million gallons of jet fuel. So when a refinery is down, it can be problematic. I mean, at 2 weeks, Matt, if we do the arithmetic, 10 million gallons a day multiplied by 14 days, we're talking about 140 million gallons of gasoline production potentially lost here. So, by the way, that's why prices in the Great Lakes here today, even now as we speak, are starting to jump up. Indiana and Ohio starting to see stations going up to $3.39 a gallon, which in Ohio is a jump from the average of about $3.15. And in Indiana, the average right now is $3.11. So $3.35 is about a 24-cent jump. Here in Florida, as many know, I've been trying to get away from that cold weather, but Florida jumped to $3.35 yesterday. And that was a big jump, Matt, for us because my station here down the street was $2.99. So that was a 36-cent jump. And I know basically most of the country, down by you're seeing jumps too, right?
Yeah, like I said, roughly about 30 to 40 cents in just a very short amount of time. Now, let me ask you this. What happened to the refinery for folks who maybe have no idea, and this was the first time of them hearing it? What happened to the refinery? Why is it down?
Yeah, back on February 1st, sources tell us, and by the way, refineries is kind of like getting nuclear launch codes, right? They are very tight-lipped on what happens at their facilities in terms of outages because it can be a negative impact on them if they say something, and if they, give too many details, it can harm them financially because they will often have to go buy gasoline from other refineries. So it's first of all, this information is very hard to get. Second of all, early on, I was told that a transformer unexpectedly failed, but I've come to learn, according to Reuters, that I believe they were the ones reporting that a second transformer had failed unexpectedly, and that's what, by the way, sent the refinery into an uncontrolled shutdown. Is when you lose power, you lose control. It's not a nuclear plant, but it's very, very delicate, right? When you lose power, you need power to be able to control the shutdown, and they didn't have any power really. So it was a fairly uncharacteristic thing to lose complete power and to not have a controlled shutdown. And now BP is having to do equipment checks on whether or not other equipment failed potentially. It's kind of like a surge, Matt, right? A surge can knock things out permanently. And so BP is now going through and checking out their equipment that could have been damaged from this uncontrolled power loss. And so the facility may be down for another week or so. Hopefully it gets back up and running. But by the way, this kind of underscores the worry that happens every spring. It's all about refineries because they're all, aside from this unexpected outage, Matt, refineries are basically getting their oil changed here before the start of the summer driving season, just like you would before a big
Right.
road trip. So what happens is while the inspections, while the maintenance is happening, it's kind of like taking your car in and they say, well, you came in for an oil change, but by the way, we see that this is, this part of your car also has some damage that needs to be replaced or addressed. So refineries can also go into maintenance, and they also find things that could keep them down or could keep them impacted longer than expected. And that's kind of the wild card every spring, is you just don't know what you're going to uncover when refineries start doing maintenance.
So hopefully a week, if the sudden power outage didn't jolt something and do some serious damage, hopefully.
Yeah. And hopefully that's the thing, is hopefully. Now, the good news is that gasoline supplies in the Great Lakes have been fairly adequate over the course of the winter. They've been built up over time. But the worry, Matt, is that all of this is going to reset when we start the transition to summer gasoline, which is just a couple of weeks away. So all of that gasoline that's built up is wiped out when we switch to summer gasoline, because the gasoline supply that they built up is winter gas. They're actually going to have to get rid of that. And now with BP's refinery being partially down, we're probably flying through those gallons. So this underscores, by the way, what everyone is going to have to worry about coast to coast is refinery turnarounds. And by the way, looking at the last week, every state but one is seeing gas prices today higher than 7 days ago. The lucky dog, any idea?
Louisiana.
It's actually probably the coldest climate
Alaska?
in the 50s. It's Alaska. They're down a penny and a half from a week ago. There's not a whole lot of rhyme or reason to it. By the way, Vermont is seeing the smallest increase, only 1.1 cents a gallon in the last week. But let me rattle some of these off, Matt. The top 10 biggest movers, and keep in mind, 49 of the nation's 50 states have seen prices go up in the last week. Michigan, the biggest increase, 25 cents. Wisconsin up 21 cents. West Virginia up 20 cents, Ohio up 18, Pennsylvania 14, North Carolina 14, Illinois 13. So most of these biggest increases, by the way, 16 states have seen increases of 10 cents a gallon or more in the last week. This is the start of the increases that we see on our way to the summer driving season. So
it
it's
seems
here.
so early. It's February.
It is a bit early. And by the way, the timing's not a perfect science, right? What happened, Matt, this year to start us early is that we had that really cold weather that we talked about in mid-January, which knocked a couple of refineries offline in Texas. And now with this BP refinery getting knocked offline, suddenly the focus is on some of these refineries which are starting maintenance earlier than expected. Plus, the price of oil has gone up a little bit in the last couple of weeks. It's up to $77 a barrel today. So again, you never know when the increases are really going to start, Matt, but it just goes to show that generally it happens around Valentine's Day, which, by the way, tomorrow, and it usually lasts through April or May, but that's not a perfect science either. Usually if it starts early, it ends early. So let's hope that happens, get a little light at the end of the tunnel here.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is certainly definitely the hope. Now, I am seeing, if I'm not mistaken, wholesale gasoline prices are, $2.39, $2.40 a gallon on average. I understand it's a regional thing sometimes as well, but that's kind of the price point that I'm seeing.
Yeah, and keep in mind that $2.39, that does include any tax. And it is a regional thing. And actually, the number you're looking at is RBOB gasoline. It's $2.39.5. That's the price. That's for NYMEX gasoline, which is it's a regional issue. That's for delivery in New York Harbor, what it's called. And there's different delivery points, Matt, across the country. Like in Chicago, for example, that's kind of the foundation for Great Lakes prices and what we call Group 3. That's the foundation for gas prices in the Corn Belt. The Gulf Coast is another one of those delivery points, and that is basically the determining factor for gas prices along the Gulf states and the entire southeastern U.S. And then if you go out west, there's different prices for the LA market, Southern California, San Francisco, which would cover Northern California, and the Pacific Northwest, which would cover Oregon and Washington. And by the way, the LA I failed to mention the LA price is also going to include areas like Phoenix and Las Vegas, who are reliant on LA refineries. So in all of those regions there, I just mentioned 7 regions, right? New York Harbor, Gulf Coast, Group 3, Chicago, LA, San Francisco, the Pacific Northwest. Those 7 regions all have a different price. The lowest right now is Group 3, the Corn Belt. The highest right now, as it tends to be, is the LA Southern California market. And the difference between those two right now is 40 cents a gallon. It can get much bigger than that. So, you're looking at that NYMEX RBOB price. It says $2.39, but there can be differences to that $2.39 price depending on what region you are. You'll either have a basis differential that's negative, which means that there's a discount for your region, or like if you're in California, there's a basis premium to that, which means that refineries are probably struggling a bit and you're paying more than that foundational price. So that's kind of a little bit on the spot price market, which is influencing those wholesale prices.
And then, of course, let's talk about the economy for just a moment, because we still seem to have that bipolar reaction. We've got layoffs coming. At the same time, the economy is still growing and consumer prices are rising more than expected now, which is creating some problems. And apparently that's the reason why, as we're recording this, the stocks are falling right now on Wall Street. So we have a lot of, again, I mean, I've seen some things, Patrick. I've seen some things, but this is very unique. This is not a normal economy in the sense that usually when you have excellent news about the economy, you also don't have large headlines about large layoffs. So, I mean, that has to be factoring in a little bit into the price of gasoline and other aspects as well. But the question is, how is it factoring in?
Well, Matt, you look at why the Dow is down 400 points right now, which is about percentage point. A lot of that's happening is because the inflation number for January was above expectations, right? There's this expectation that the Fed is doing a good job to rein in inflation. But then when you come to find out, hey, inflation didn't come down by as much as everyone was hoping, that means the Fed is not going to be able to return to cutting interest rates as soon because the inflation is still above their target. Only when the inflation rate starts to get down below 2% is the Fed really going to pull the trigger on cutting inflation, cutting interest rates will then inspire the economy. So, by the way, that's why the Dow is down so much today. It's kind of this inverse relationship, right? Where good news for one area of the economy, whether it's a hot jobs report or, lower inflation is not actually the good news that you may think it is, because it may require the Fed to delay cutting interest rates.
Yeah, this is a very unique situation again that I'm just it's just unique. I don't really know how else to put it. It's not something I've ever seen in certainly my career of news and broadcasting and whatnot since the late 1990s or whatever. This is a minute. It's different.
It is very different, and that goes to show, Matt, how much the market is really cheerleading the potential of lower interest rates, because right now higher interest rates are restrictive, right? And the market wants to see interest rates decline so that there can be more growth. And right now, the hotter than expected inflation data is the only thing preventing the Fed from starting to lower interest rates. So what happens if inflation is above expectations? The stock market sells off, because that means the Fed's not going to be able to cut interest rates as quickly. So, and there can be an impact to the price of oil. Right now, the price of oil is not really reacting to the Fed inflation number. Usually it would, what is bad for the Dow is bad for oil. But today, the price of oil is actually up just a slight bit to 93 cents a barrel. And there have been various investment banks, by the way, in the last couple of weeks that are raising their forecast on the price of oil for 2024 as right now, Matt, there's kind of this balance between supply and demand. And some investment banks have seen or predicted that the price of oil would remain under pressure because global inventories have been healthy, but inventories are now declining at a little bit more of an accelerated pace. And when inventories or supply comes down, prices generally go up, which is why oil is up a little bit today at 90 cents a barrel. But beyond that, I spoke to a reporter this morning. It's important for people to understand that this is the time of year that we generally see the relationship between the price of oil and the price of gasoline loosen. It disconnects.
So yeah, that's another.
Don't
that's
look at the
another
price of oil anymore.
Kind of gets thrown at you, you know.
Yeah, and what I was going to say is, don't look at the price of oil. Look at the price of as you said, that RBOB gasoline. And if you look at the two, there tends to be a historical disconnect in the spring. And if you only look at the price of oil, Matt, every spring, you're probably like, why in the heck are gas prices going way up? Because the price of oil isn't. So what happens? Well, that's where this seasonal stuff comes into play, because the seasonal stuff doesn't really impact the price of oil. So what is the difference between oil and gasoline? The only difference, Matt, is that gasoline has been refined. And that's the wild card here that many Americans forget about. It becomes a story about refineries every spring because they do maintenance and sometimes they find things, and maintenance basically gets in the way of their ability to produce gasoline. So, and if there's unexpected outages, cough, cough, what we're seeing right now at the refinery in Northwest Indiana, that can be critical because, and by the way, as gasoline demand starts to go up, by the way, temperatures warm up, Americans start getting out more and more, and that's where this increase in demand comes from. So that is putting more pressure on refineries to get this maintenance work done, because in the backdrop, Americans are going to start driving more and more as the weather warms.
So this is something that I'm seeing. This is a particular story. Where am I at? CNBC. That's actually reporting this, that food prices moved higher, as well as energy, actually helping to offset some of the increase. Energy was down 0.9%, largely due to a 3.3% slide in gasoline prices. So that if you exclude what they're saying, that the volatile food and energy prices, the so-called core CPI, Consumer Price Index, accelerated 0.4% in January, was up 3.9% from a year ago. They're saying that basically, this particular slide in gasoline prices, had it not been for that, the index would have been even higher. Well, now we're seeing prices on the gasoline and oil moving in that higher direction. So that may not bode well for February's numbers, right? Well, it takes a minute to explain, right? I mean, you can't just dive right in.
That was a terrific job at explaining it. Exactly right, Matt. Just a couple of days ago, the national average was, and by the way, the critical view for this data on inflation is a year ago, right? That's the determining factor. How much has the price of X gone up compared to a year ago? Well, Matt, just a couple of days ago, the national average, that is the national average price of gasoline, was 20 cents lower than a year ago. And that's why energy was actually pulling prices down, because energy this January, the price of gasoline in January was cheaper than last year in January by quite a bit. But the worry is that even a few days ago, the national average was 20 cents below a year ago. Now it's only 13 cents below a year ago. So, and by the way, for the first time since, I'm quickly trying to pull this data up to see the last time this happened, but the price of diesel was at $3.99 a gallon when we issued our Monday pricing data figures. The price of diesel today is now back above. Ooh, wow! Look at that. Sunday it was $3.98. The price of diesel on Monday hit $4.04, and today it's at $4.05. So it's actually
and the day's not over today.
Yeah, you talk about reflation. The price of diesel at $4.05 is now at the highest level since early December.
So that price, the diesel price, is important, especially for things like transporting goods, because as it goes up, the cost of shipping usually follows, which then those prices kind of get passed on to the consumer on the store shelves, because it costs a whole lot more to get that product onto the store shelf than before.
Yeah, but however, since we were talking about inflation, right? Inflation looks at year ago prices. The one interesting dynamic, Matt, is that while gasoline is only 14 cents below where it was a year ago, the price of diesel is still about 50 cents lower than a year ago. So in context, the price of diesel is up slightly at its highest level since December. That's not the worst thing to happen. I'm not worried about, stores are, here we go again. I'm not worried at that yet, because diesel is still 50 cents below a year ago. I was, just making the comment that I'm not too worried about diesel yet, right? Because it's still a year-on-year deficit by a big amount. Diesel's actually the far better deal compared to a year ago, because it's 50 cents lower, whereas the price of gasoline is only 13 cents lower. So the inflation numbers should continue to, show energy is pulling prices down, because even though prices are going up, Matt, they're still cheaper than a year ago. Diesel is going to start likely heading back down again this spring, because diesel, keep in mind, diesel is the opposite of gasoline. Gasoline prices are highest in summer, lowest in winter. Diesel is the opposite because of heating oil. Diesel prices tend to be highest in winter, lowest in summer. And we are on the closing innings here of winter. Thank God, by the way.
Yeah. Says the guy sitting in Florida.
Hey, 45 degrees. We had a wind chill advisory, a week ago because it was 45 degrees, Matt. Come on now.
I lived in Florida for years. I know what it's like.
I feel like my blood is not going to be tolerant of colder temperatures anymore.
Oh, it's not. After you move, if you move back to someplace, trust me, I know it's not. It really is not. I have detested winter ever since I left Florida 11 years ago.
I wonder if there's like a cold chamber that I can just stick myself in for a month and get my body back on that northern climate.
Nope. The blood thins and it never goes back. I'm just telling you, 11 years later, I still look out at winter and go, why? Oh, why? It's so wrong. Oh, goodness. But so, all right, very quickly on some of these things. The question mark that I have then is, if we're already seeing a price increase now, that doesn't necessarily mean, and this is a question mark at the end, not a statement, that doesn't necessarily mean that prices are going to be even higher this summer than last summer. Is that a good way of looking at it, even though we're seemingly a bit early on the increase?
Yeah, I wouldn't worry about it too much, Matt, because the way I measure it is I look at the lowest price in the winter, and I compare it to the peak in spring. And typically the difference between the winter low and the spring or rarely summer high, and by the way, typically prices don't peak in summer. They typically peak just before summer, because that's where the pressure comes from the summer gasoline changeover. So typically the difference between those two, the low and the high in the spring in the winter, is about 35 to 85 cents a gallon, meaning that typically there is an increase of 35 to 85 cents a gallon between the low and the high. The low this year, Matt, was at 303. That was just a few weeks ago, actually. We're already at 323. So of that 35 to 85 cent increase that we usually see, we're already seeing an increase of 20 cents. So arithmetic would tell us that we probably have another 15 to 55 cents or 60 cents to go. So we still have an increase, but we should see, Matt, let me cliff note it here for people that are struggling with the math. We should see prices this summer that are fairly close to what they were last year, maybe a few cents lower.
And so help us remember what was last year.
Last year prices peaked actually in late summer, not late summer, not early summer, which was rare. But last year, to pull up the chart here real quick, prices actually last year were slowly decreasing right now. They were about $338 a year ago. They dropped to $332 at the end of February. But then by mid-March, they were $345. There was a little bit of a break. They fell to $344 by the end of March. And last year, April was filled with a rise in price. April started at about $340 a gallon. And then by April 20, we hit our peak at $369 a gallon. I think we'll get close to that again this summer before prices level off. And by the way, like I said, usually gas prices peak in April or May. Last year they peaked in April, and then they shot up late summer in August because of all the refinery issues. You'll remember they shot up to $385. So, there's going to be an increase over the next few weeks. It may not be every week, but I don't expect us to peak in price until April or May. And some areas really haven't started to see the worst of the increases, Matt. Most of the country, I think the bigger increases are coming, and they'll probably start in late February, early March. And by the way, just like last year, there could be some timeouts in the spring jump in price, right? Last year, I described there were 2 times when there were kind of timeouts that gas prices took a break for a couple of weeks and then started to go back up. So this is not going to be every single day prices go up. More often than not, it's more like every few days.
So I'm still not happy with the increase in prices.
Of course, nobody is.
Well, I mean, some people have, maybe, I don't know, but yeah, I'm not. It doesn't make sense to me, but it is what it is, and it's been this way, I guess, my entire life for the most part. So let me throw very quickly before I know we've got to wrap up here shortly, but from time to time, I do like to ask this question, and it's about geopolitics, basically, or even the political aspect of different stuff. Anything out there in your crystal ball, be it international or even internal politics here in the United States, that you see that could create some issues as we go about the next several weeks?
Well, Matt, what's been really interesting, I think, for those that watch the political machine a couple of weeks ago, and maybe you saw this headline, that President Biden was limiting new permitting for liquefied natural gas exports. Did you see that?
I did.
So that's had a very interesting effect. And by the way, I looked at natural gas just now. It's down another 6% today. The price of natural gas has not been this low outside of the pandemic since 2000. Matt,
Really?
we're looking at the cheapest natural gas prices in some 20 years outside of the pandemic. And, to your question, that has played a role. President Biden is basically saying, we're not going to allow any more natural gas to get out of the country. Well, what does that do? It depresses prices here at home, but that's also going to depress investment, and natural gas supply may go down as a result of that. Because Matt, why would you produce something if you can't sell it to a buyer?
So you're saying
right?
It may be a temporary depression in pricing, whereas longer term it may become a problem.
Exactly. There's always a short-term gain, but then when companies realize, hey, we can't sell as much, well, why would they produce as much? So that's the inherent danger of such a policy, is that in the short term, it may push prices down, but in the long run, that's going to stop companies from investing and increasing capacity. So I don't think beyond that, there's not really been anything that geopolitically has really shifted, Matt. So there's not really been any developments, but
yeah, Ukraine
that was
is
a great
still
question.
Ukraine, Israel is still Israel, the
Red Sea,
yeah.
There
Everything
hasn't
is
been a
still
whole
where it
lot
is.
that's really exactly. So nothing's the biggest needle movers right now are the seasonal factors, and that's going to be that's going to continue to really drive markets in the coming weeks.
So I have one more quick question, because I know you've got to get going here. Typically during presidential election years from years past, is it a little bit more tumultuous in gas prices than non-presidential election years in the United States?
Not really. There's not really much difference at all, because unlike the presidential election, the thing that sets gas prices is economic supply and demand. And almost every fall ahead of the election, there's a decrease in demand, right? Because Americans don't drive as much as the temperature gets colder, and we switch back to cheaper winter gasoline. So the election year does not do anything to gas prices at all. The gas prices are going to do their seasonal ups and downs, up in the spring, down in the fall, just like clockwork. I'm not expecting, a whole lot of change from the presidential election, but maybe this is for your future presidential or future episode, as we can talk about the presidential election.
I would like
its potential impact on things like EVs.
Yeah, I would definitely like to talk about that, because I think there could be a lot of conversations we could have about that, in all honesty. So I know we've got to wrap it up. Patrick, how do folks get a hold of us?
Well, you can reach out to us on social, of course, Over a Barrel Show, Over a Barrel Matt, and I'm Gas Buddy Guy, or shoot us an email to podcast@gasbuddy.com.
Have a good one.